I was born in a quiet corner of Cairo, where the buildings lean a little too close to each other, and the sky always smells faintly of spices and dust. I never imagined life beyond our narrow alley or the rhythm of the adhan echoing 5 times a day. Faith wasn't just something we practiced, it was the very air we breathed. My name is Amina, and all I ever wanted in this world was to be a good daughter, a faithful Muslim, and a mother. A real mother. My life truly began the day I held my son, Yusuf, in my arms. He was so small, so helpless, his skin soft like warm dough, and his eyes were always searching, even as a newborn. I still remember the first time he grasped my finger. It was like Allah himself had placed a piece of heaven into my hand. I had never known such love. No one prepares you for it, the kind of love that fills your chest and leaves no room for anything else. Raising Yusuf was my greatest joy. From the time he could walk, he followed me everywhere. In the mornings, we'd sit together on the woven prayer rug in our living room, the sun slipping through the lace curtains, casting golden patterns on the floor. I would recite from the Quran, and he would try to mimic my voice, his tiny hands fumbling with the pages, even before he knew how to read. I taught him the words not just with my lips, but with my heart. I wanted him to grow up strong, faithful, respectful. And he did. Our days were quiet but full. I woke before dawn, wrapped in my hijab before stepping into the cool silence of early morning. I would pray, then prepare his breakfast, always simple things, eggs with flatbread or lentils with olive oil. We didn't have much, but we had enough. I walked him to school when he was little, holding his hand the whole way. He was always talking, always smiling. He had this way of tilting his head when he was curious, which was often. He'd ask about the clouds, the birds, the meaning of certain prayers. Sometimes I didn't have the answers, but I'd always try. Friday was our favorite day. We would dress in our best clothes and go to the mosque together. I wore my black abaya, and he wore a tiny white thobe that made him look like a little sheikh. After prayers, we would sit under the fig tree near the courtyard, and he'd share whatever he learned during the sermon. His memory was remarkable. At just 10 years old, he had memorized nearly half the Quran. The Imam praised him often, saying he was a light in the mosque. I believed that too. He was my light. My everything. At night, after dinner, we had a tradition. We would sit cross-legged on the mat and read stories of the prophets. He loved Prophet Yusuf the most. Maybe because they shared a name. He would always say, "Mummar, do you think Allah will let me have dreams like Yusuf?" I'd smile and brush his hair back from his forehead, telling him that dreams are for those who stay close to Allah. And he would nod, serious as ever, and say, then I'll stay close to him forever. There was no one else in our home. My husband passed away when Yusuf was only 2. A heart attack, sudden and cruel. From that moment, it was just the 2 of us. I worked in a tailor shop during the day, sewing clothes for wealthier families. I wore my grief like a second skin, but Yusuf's laughter stitched hope into every torn part of me. Even on the hardest days, when my fingers were raw from needles or when bills piled up, his smile was enough. His joy became my peace. He never complained, not even once. If I brought home 1 piece of bread, he'd break it in half and say, "Mummar, I'm not hungry. You eat first." He looked out for me like a man far older than his age. And yet, he was still so full of wonder, so tender. When I got sick once with a fever, he stayed up all night beside me, cooling my forehead with a wet cloth, whispering prayers as if his little voice had the power to heal. I don't know if people outside of our faith or our culture can understand the depth of that bond. He wasn't just my son. He was the rhythm of my life. Every prayer I made was for him. Every sacrifice, every step, every heartbeat, I offered to Allah for the sake of my boy. I didn't dream of riches or comfort. I only dreamed of seeing him grow up, marry, and become an imam or a scholar, someone respected and godly. I prayed for that day, year after year. I thought I was giving him everything he needed. Faith, love, stability. But now, as I speak these words, there's an ache in my chest that never goes away. A space that once held joy, now filled with memories and silence. I didn't know then that love can be tested in ways that break you. That faith can be stretched until it doesn't look like it once did. That a mother's heart, no matter how full, can shatter. But back then, I was just Amina, the proud mother of Yusuf. And I thought that was enough. I still remember the day Yusuf received his acceptance letter to university. He came running into the house, waving the envelope like a boy who had just caught the wind. His eyes were glowing, and I could see the pride on his face. He had worked so hard, late nights of studying, fasting during exams, always seeking to honor me and Allah with his efforts. I hugged him tightly, feeling tears gather in my eyes. Alhamdulillah, I whispered into his hair. My son, now a man, is walking into a future I had prayed for. The first few weeks were uneventful. He would come home with stories of lectures, classmates, long hours in the library. He was excited, curious, and thoughtful, just as he had always been. But slowly, almost quietly, something began to shift. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was in the way he paused before speaking, in the way his eyes wandered off while eating dinner, lost in thought. He wasn't pulling away. No, he still kissed my forehead every morning, still helped with the groceries, still led the prayers when I was too tired. But something unseen had taken root in his heart. One evening, while we were sharing lentil soup in the small kitchen, he asked, Mummar, why do we say Jesus didn't die? The Christians seem so certain that he did. I stopped mid-bite. The spoon in my hand trembled just slightly. I tried to smile, pretending it was just innocent curiosity. Because the Quran says so, Habibi. Allah raised him up. It's what we've always believed. He nodded, respectfully, but his eyes stayed fixed on mine a second longer than usual, like he was measuring the weight of my answer. That was the first question. Then came more. Not all at once, but enough to unsettle the calm we had always shared. Mummar, why are the Christians in my class so peaceful? Even when others mock them, they smile. Another time he asked, why do they talk about God like they know him personally? I would brush off his questions gently, redirecting him to more familiar ground. I'd say, their religion is not the truth. Don't be distracted, Yusuf. We are the people of the final prophet. That is the path you must stay on. But the questions didn't stop. He started mentioning names I didn't recognize, students he met during group projects. A young man named David, a girl named Sarah. He said they were kind, never pushed their beliefs, but were always ready to explain what they believed if asked. He told me how one day, while waiting for their turn to present a project, David shared how his life had changed after knowing Christ. He said God loved him even when he failed, and that he spoke to him through the Bible, Yusuf told me quietly. I don't understand, Mummar, do they really believe God speaks like that? My heart tightened in my chest. I tried to stay calm, but inside me, a storm had started. These were not just casual curiosities anymore, these were seeds. Seeds that, if not stopped, would grow into something dangerous. something I couldn't control. I told him to be careful. You must be respectful, yes, but remember who you are. You are a Muslim. You are my son. He lowered his eyes, as he always did, and nodded. But I could tell, his thoughts were already somewhere else. I began to worry more than I prayed. I would wake in the night and find him not in his bed, but sitting quietly by the window, looking at the stars. Once, I found a paper on his desk with a verse from the Injil scribbled on the back. I froze. My hands trembled as I held it. It said something about light shining in the darkness, and the darkness not overcoming it. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand an explanation. But I didn't. I folded the paper and placed it back where I found it. The fear I felt wasn't just for him. It was for our name, for our place in the community. What would people say? How could I look the Imam in the eyes? What would his late father think if he saw this? Every evening I prayed longer, my forehead pressed harder into the rug, my whispers turning desperate. Ya Allah, bring him back. Protect his heart. Don't let the wrong path steal him from me. Eventually, I visited the Imam, a gentle old man who had known Youssef since he was a child. I told him Youssef had been asking too many questions, strange ones. The Imam smiled, but there was concern behind his eyes. He said, "It is good for young men to ask. But the answers must come from the truth. Bring him to me. I will speak with him." I nodded, thanking him, but inside I knew Youssef was not just asking. He was searching. And that was what terrified me the most. Because I had raised him to obey, not to search. I had taught him to follow the path, not question it. But now, something had awakened in him. Something I did not understand. And worse, I was beginning to feel like I was losing the boy I once knew. He still kissed my forehead. He still smiled at me. But behind his eyes, there was a distance, and I couldn't reach it. I held onto prayer harder than ever. Because when love starts slipping through your fingers, you cling to whatever is left. Even if it's just a whisper in the dark. I didn't know it then, but while I was waking in the early hours to pray for my son's heart to remain firm in Islam, Youssef was stepping into a world I couldn't see. A world I didn't understand. It began quietly, like most changes do. A missed curfew here, a vague excuse there. He said he was studying late at the library. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Youssef had never lied to me before. But something was different. I could feel it in the way his voice softened when he spoke of certain people, David, Sarah, that group of Christian students he'd mentioned before. One Friday evening, he didn't return until almost midnight. His shirt was damp with sweat, but his face glowed with something I couldn't explain. Peaceful, yes, but not the kind that came after prayer or rest. It was something deeper, something unsettling. Later, I would learn the truth. That he hadn't been studying at all. That he had been sneaking out to attend a secret gathering. Not in a mosque. Not in a public hall. But in a simple living room, hidden inside an apartment tucked behind a bakery in downtown Cairo. They called it a house church. No signs. No loud speakers. Just whispered greetings, locked doors, and songs sung in low, trembling voices. Youssef told me about it, long after everything else had already crumbled. He said that the first time he entered, his hands were shaking. He expected to be judged, questioned. But instead, he was met with kindness. A young man opened the door and said, "Welcome, brother." They offered him tea. They smiled. And they prayed, so gently, so sincerely, it made him weep. He told me how they sang in a language he didn't know, but somehow understood. The words, the music, the presence in that room, it overwhelmed him. He had never felt that before, not even in the mosque. He said that while they were singing about Jesus being near to the brokenhearted, something broke open inside of him. He wept that night, he told me. Not out of shame, but relief. I tried to imagine it. My son, standing in a stranger's home, surrounded by Christians, tears running down his face, and yet feeling safe. Feeling seen. I didn't understand it. I still don't. After a few visits, he asked them questions. All the questions he had kept from me. About Jesus. About sin. About forgiveness. About love. They didn't push him. They simply shared what they believed. And one evening, after months of wrestling, he made a decision. Quietly. Intentionally. He surrendered his heart to Jesus. He didn't kneel in front of a crowd. He didn't make a speech. There was no grand ceremony. Just a whispered prayer in a circle of believers and a heart that finally felt like it had come home. A few days later, they baptized him. Not in a river. Not in a church. But in someone's bathroom. A porcelain tub, barely wide enough to stretch his arms. He climbed in fully clothed. And when they gently pushed him under the water and raised him back up, he said it felt like he could breathe for the first time. All of this, I didn't know. At home, he was still my boy. Still smiling. Still kind. But he had begun to carry a secret heavier than anything I had ever placed on his shoulders. He started reading the Bible late at night, under his blanket, using the flashlight on his phone. I would sometimes see the light coming from his room, thinking he was just studying. He kept the small New Testament hidden in the lining of his backpack. He treated it like a treasure. Every verse he read, he underlined. He was hungry. Not for knowledge, but for truth. For something real. And when the weight of this new life pressed too heavily on his chest, he would write. I found his journal only after everything. He had hidden it well, behind a loose floorboard under his bed. He wrote of the tension tearing at his soul. Of the nights he would cry after we prayed together, knowing he believed differently now, but couldn't bring himself to hurt me. He loved me. He said it over and over in his writing. I don't want to break Mamar's heart, he wrote. But I can't deny what I've seen, what I feel. Jesus is alive. I've met him. I can't walk away. He was torn. Between the woman who gave him life and the Savior who gave him new life. And I was sleeping under the same roof, never knowing that my son had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. A line that, for me, would change everything. It happened on a Thursday. I remember because I had just returned early from the tailor shop to start preparing for Jummer the next day. The house was quiet. Youssef wasn't home yet. He had messaged to say he'd be late. I decided to tidy his room, as I sometimes did, folding the blanket he had forgotten to lay flat, placing his books neatly in a pile by the corner. I took comfort in these small motherly acts. It made me feel close to him. I was dusting the top shelf of his closet when something fell. A small, leather-bound book, its edges worn, its cover soft from use. I bent down to pick it up, assuming it was another textbook. But when I turned it over, I froze. The words hit me like a slap, a New Testament, the Holy Bible. My hands went cold. I stared at the cover, praying it was a mistake, that maybe it had been given to him as a curiosity, something academic. But when I opened it, I saw pages filled with notes in his handwriting. Underlined verses. Scribbles in the margins. Words like a truth, or a peace, or a light, are circled over and over. I sat down on his bed, the book resting in my lap, and I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded in my ears. I felt something deep in my stomach, like the ground had shifted beneath me. I ran my fingers over the pages, trembling, hoping it was all some horrible misunderstanding. When Yusef finally came home, he walked in smiling. I was still sitting on his bed. The Bible was in my hands. His smile disappeared instantly. There was a long silence. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. I held the book up and said, What is this?" My voice was low, shaky, but full of fire. He opened his mouth, but no words came at first. Then he sat beside me and whispered, "Mummar, please let me explain." "Explain?" I snapped. "You're reading this? You're writing in it? Yusef, this is haram. This is Christian scripture. What are you doing with this in our home?" He looked at me with eyes I had never seen before, calm, almost sorrowful. Not rebellious. Not ashamed. Just steady. He placed his hand gently on mine and said, "Mummar, I didn't want to hurt you. I've been searching for the truth. And I found it." I pulled my hand away. "The truth? And you think this, I lifted the Bible, this is the truth? After everything I taught you? After everything your father believed?" He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He just said, I met him, Mummar. Jesus. Not a prophet, but the Son of God. He is real. He is alive. I felt his peace in a way I've never known before. His words pierced me deeper than any knife ever could. I stood up, clutching the Bible as if it burned. "Stop. Don't say another word." But he kept speaking. "Mummar, he loves you too. He died for you. For me. For all of us. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life." I believe that with all my heart. That was the moment I lost control. I slapped him. My hand flew without thinking. The sound echoed in the room. His face turned to the side, but he didn't flinch. He didn't look angry. Only or hurt. "You shame me," I whispered through clenched teeth. "You shame your father's memory. Our family. Our faith. How could you?" Tears filled his eyes, but he stayed calm. "I still love you, Mummar. Nothing will ever change that." "No." I shouted. "Don't you dare say that. Love? You call this love? You spit on everything I raised you to believe. You betray our home, our name. Allah himself." I couldn't think clearly. Rage, pain, confusion, they all flooded me at once. I grabbed the Bible and threw it across the room. It hit the wall and fell to the floor. He bent slowly to pick it up, his hands gentle as if it were something sacred. I looked at him, this boy I had carried in my womb, the one I had raised with prayers and hope, and I didn't recognize him anymore. "Get out," I said coldly. "Leave this house. I don't want to see your face again." He didn't move. He stood there for a moment, his shoulders rising and falling with each breath, his eyes never leaving mine. "I'll go," he said softly. "But I'll never stop loving you. And I'll never stop praying for you." And just like that, he turned and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. And with that sound, my world broke in half. I collapsed onto the prayer rug, my sobs choking the air. I screamed into the silence. I beat my fists against the floor. I asked Allah, why? Why would you let this happen? But there was no answer. Only silence. Only the sound of a mother's heart breaking in the place her son used to pray. The silence in the house was louder than any scream. Since Yusuf left, I could barely breathe. I thought I would feel justified, maybe even proud that I had defended my faith and protected our family name. But all I felt was hollow. My son was gone, and the echo of his last words, "I still love you, Mama," wouldn't stop ringing in my head. Night after night, sleep became a stranger. When I did manage to close my eyes, I saw him, not as a rebellious traitor, but as a little boy again. The same boy who used to cling to my dress, who would kiss my hands after prayers, who laughed with a joy that filled our home. But now, in my dreams, he cried. He looked at me through tear-filled eyes and asked, why, Mama?" I'd wake up with my pillow wet, my chest aching, and the guilt swallowing me whole. One night, I went to the mosque. I sat in the corner and cried, hoping the walls would absorb my pain, that Allah would ease my heart. But for the first time in my life, I felt nothing. The words felt heavy on my tongue. I bowed, I prayed, I begged, but all I received was silence. When I got home, I found his letter again. I had read it 100 times, maybe more. Every word carried his heart, not bitterness, not anger, only love, and a strange kind of peace that confused me. "I forgive you, Mama. I pray for you every day. Jesus has changed me. I hope you can one day see what I see." His handwriting trembled slightly on the page, but his message was steady, strong. I couldn't stop thinking about the change in him. Long before I knew what had happened, he was different. Calmer. Kinder. Like he carried a secret joy. I had dismissed it then, thinking maybe he was maturing. But now, I realized it was something deeper. Something holy. I didn't tell anyone. Not my sisters, not the imam, no one. But in the quietest moments, when the house was dark and still, I opened my phone. My fingers trembled as I typed, "A Muslim sees Jesus." I thought I would only look for a second, maybe out of curiosity. But once I started watching the testimonies, I couldn't stop. Young men like Yusuf. Mothers. Even former imams. Their stories pierced me. So many spoke of love, of truth, of a savior who met them in dreams, in pain, in secret. I shut the screen quickly every time I heard a sound, terrified someone would see. But I kept going back. Each night, I whispered his name, a say, like a question I didn't yet understand. My lips had never said it with reverence before. But now, somehow, it brought a strange comfort to my heart. I was slipping into a place I didn't recognize. But in that darkness, something stirred. A question. A longing. And maybe, just maybe, the first flicker of hope. I will never forget the day my world shattered. The call came early in the morning, so early, I knew it couldn't be good. My hands trembled as I answered, my heart pounding before a word was even spoken. All I heard was confusion, shouting, someone sobbing. And then one sentence pierced through the chaos. a Yusuf has been attacked. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the walls around me collapsed. I screamed his name as if somehow my voice would reach him. My neighbors came running, but I pushed past them. I didn't care about appearances anymore. My son, my Yusuf, was hurt. That was all I knew. Later I learned what had happened. He had gone with a few of his Christian friends to deliver Bibles in a nearby village. Just like he always did, quietly, with love, never to provoke anyone. But someone had found out. A group of angry men cornered them, yelling that they were spreading lies here and betraying Islam. Before he could run, they began to beat him. He never even raised a hand in defense. That was just like him. He believed in peace, even when faced with hatred. They left him bleeding, broken. His friends rushed him to the hospital, but the injuries were too much. My Yusuf didn't make it. When I arrived at the hospital, they tried to stop me from entering the room. But I pushed through, desperate to see him. And there he was, still, pale, lifeless. My knees gave out, and I fell beside his bed. I couldn't stop shaking. I couldn't stop crying. But then, I looked at his face. He didn't look like someone who had been brutally attacked. His face wasn't twisted in fear or pain. There was a strange peace about him, a soft calmness that made no sense to me. It was as if he had seen something, someone, before he took his last breath. I reached for the Bible he always carried, now stained and torn. I clutched it to my chest and wailed like I never had before. I wasn't just mourning the loss of my son. I was mourning the loss of the walls I had built around my heart. The walls he had gently tried to tear down. For the first time, I whispered a prayer, not to Allah, but to the one my son loved so deeply. God of Yusuf, or if you are real, why did you take him from me? But even in my pain, I knew. Yusuf hadn't been taken. He had been received. And maybe, just maybe, he was finally home. The days after Yusuf's burial felt like a blur. My body moved, but my soul, it was somewhere else, lost in the pain. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. The house was too quiet. Every corner reminded me of him, his laughter, his prayers, his soft voice reading scripture. One afternoon, I found myself holding his Bible again, the same one I had clutched to my chest at the hospital. I opened it without thinking, just letting the pages fall where they may. My eyes landed on the words, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." It was like Yusuf's voice was reading it to me. I started to cry, deep, shaking sobs. That evening, something inside me shifted. I didn't want to run from the truth anymore. I needed to know the Jesus my son loved so deeply, the one he gave everything for. So I returned to the secret house church. I didn't know what I would say, or how I'd be received. All I knew was that I couldn't carry this pain alone anymore. As soon as I stepped in, I was met with warm eyes and open arms. I couldn't hold back my tears. I don't know how, but I need him, I whispered through the sobs. I need Jesus. They prayed over me, laying hands gently on my shoulders. I remember falling to my knees and crying like a child, as if years of guilt, fear, and shame were being pulled out of me, piece by piece. In that sacred moment, I surrendered. I gave my life to Jesus. A few nights later, under the cover of darkness, I was baptized. The water was cold, but I didn't care. When I came out of it, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. Not the peace the world gives. It was deeper. Trar. It was him. Since then, I've been quietly working with underground ministries, reaching out to women like me, Muslim mothers who are questioning, afraid, alone. I know their hearts. I know their fear. And now, I also know their hope. Sometimes I sit by Yusuf's photo, holding it close. I still cry, but they're different tears now. Tears of longing, of hope. I whisper to him, "We will meet again, my son, in the place where there are no more tears." And in my heart, I hear his voice, gentle, joyful, free, welcoming me home.
From the quiet prayers of a faithful Muslim mother to the shattered cries of a grieving believer, Amina's journey is a story of heartbreak, courage, and eternal hope. She lost everything: her husband, her son, her place in the world, but in the ashes of loss, she found the truth that set her free, a truth worth everything. Her story reminds us that following Jesus comes at a cost, but the reward is far greater. In Yusuf's final moments, peace marked his face. In Amina's surrender, she found strength. And today, she walks boldly in the light, serving others in the very shadows where she once hid. Now it's our turn. Pray for believers like Amina, who face danger for simply believing. Support the underground churches and secret ministries bringing hope to the hidden corners of the world. If this story touched your heart, comment below, "Jesus is worth it." Like, share, and subscribe to Mysterious Uplift for more stories that show the power of faith, the price of truth, and the beauty of salvation. This is not just one woman's story. It's the story of many. Let's be their voice. Let's stand together.